Good afternoon. It's time again for another episode of Never Punt, Never Parlay, part of Hit the Books HQ and part of the Hammer Network. Great gaming content all across Hit the Books YouTube channel. You can get Condition Powers a couple times a week in addition to us, and you can get great content for all sports over at the Hammer. I'm Parker Fleming, your host at Stats War on Twitter, and I have alongside me, as I will from now, every Tuesday from now until the end of the season, Douglas Farmer, my co-host. Douglas, how are you today?
Parker, I'm doing pretty well. I'm throwing some technical adjustments here on the fly, and you know what? I'm doing better than Joey Knish would. If he had to break out a new laptop, the show would not start for another 8 minutes. So I'm going to take that small win, give that dig at our fellow Hit the Books HQ content maker, and then we'll get this rolling. There was a great week of football we just enjoyed. I don't know how much of Friday night you watched. We can get to that laugh in a little bit, but we should start in the Pac-12, right? If we're going to look back at last week, the highlight was the Pac-12.
It was a lot of fun in the Pac-12, certainly between Washington and Oregon on that weekend afternoon slate, and Oregon State, UCLA. A lot of eyes were over there. Notre Dame, USC. So Pac-12 was responsible for a lot there. That Washington-Oregon game lived up to every bit of the hype. I think we got a push if you had Oregon +3 there, or I suppose if you had Washington -3, you also had a push on that. Michael Penix is very good. It looked like he got a little banged up there at the end. I was very impressed that he got the Mariah Needs to Sing stuff and was able to make it work on that last drive. Very, very impressive showing by both of those teams. Hard not to root to see those guys play each other again. That's kind of my takeaway.
And really, this weekend kind of emphasized that. We saw Utah for the last few weeks has looked broken without Cam Rising on offense. USC got exposed. We'll get to that in a minute. Oregon and Washington really separated themselves by playing each other on Saturday. Penix looked banged up, but we should give some credit. I don't want to take too much of a dig at you, Parker. I'm not positive I can run 53 yards in 33 seconds. I'm obviously exaggerating when I say that. They covered 53 yards in 2 plays in 33 seconds to win that game. And that's impressive no matter the situation. Michael Penix, a Heisman moment, whatever you want to call it. It was impressive. The only other part I really want to acknowledge from that game is Dan Lanning gambled. And this podcast is called Never Punt, Never Parlay. You know darn well you and I both appreciated what Dan Lanning was doing.
Yeah, well, I think anyone who's kind of thinking about it critically there, like, would you rather the game be decided? So let's assume that you don't trust your defensive backs at all, and that you are going to give up points to Washington there, and you're going to have to score again if they score, right? Would you rather have a non-zero chance of keeping the ball, or would you rather have a 0 chance of keeping the ball? Super easy. Next question, right? That's about the long and short of it. I didn't love some of their short field stuff. I feel like Nick's really kind of missed a couple. Maybe missed a couple reads. I don't know. Something was off about a couple of those short yards plays, but I like that Dan Lanning trusts the process there, and Oregon's still in fine position to win Pac-12 to go to playoff. You know, certainly a very complete team on both sides of the ball there. Speaking of complete teams and the exact opposite of complete teams, I'm going to look at USC, which is perhaps one of the more incomplete asymmetrical teams that we've seen. We know, Douglas, you've been saying you'll believe in the USC defense when you see it, and I don't believe that we're going to see anything different from this USC difference. There is no next level. There is no improvement. They are who they are, and it's kind of like an ontological question. Can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? Can USC's defense dig a big enough hole that Caleb Williams can't get them out of it? Yes, they can. We've seen evidence of that.
Well, in this instance, Caleb Williams dug the hole that was too deep for him to get out of it. Going into this game, if you remember last week, all summer my lines were, I'll believe in USC's defense when I see it, and I'll believe in Notre Dame's receivers when I see them. And last week we outlined a version where Notre Dame's running game would make it so we didn't see either. That's not what happened. Notre Dame's defense made it so we didn't see either. I still don't believe in USC's defense. It's tough to hold an offense in check when they get the ball at the 2-yard line, the 12-yard line, midfield. 2 return touchdowns. Notre Dame's defense alone basically beat USC. And we didn't see Notre Dame's receivers. 1 explosive play. In the last 4 games, Notre Dame has totaled 4 plays of 30 yards or more. That's not good enough. So both of them still linger in that respect. The only real takeaway there was Notre Dame's defense showed up. Caleb Williams can be stopped, and Notre Dame's defense is that good. That's all I learned from that game.
Yeah, absolutely. This game felt very similar to a Notre Dame game from last year. I believe it was the BYU game where they had a couple short fields, but then kicked field goals, and so they won. But it didn't look as decisive here. They did score, and they twisted the knife, and that's what you like to see, is finishing those drives in those positive situations from Notre Dame there. This Louisville loss. I love the transitive property here. You can go further with this, but FIU has a transitive win over USC. You love to see it. The nation clamored for it, and we needed it, and we got it. So Louisville dropping a very winnable game to Pitt doing Pitt things there. A little bit more in the Pac-12. Actually, no, I don't want to. I'm skipping this game. It's on our notes.
Come on, it matters to my future, Parker.
I don't want to talk about Colorado anymore.
I'm talking about a Stanford victory. I'm the guy sitting here with an under 2.5 wins ticket at plus 128, and I just saw Stanford come back from 29-0 at halftime. I may or may not know some people who bought Stanford money line at halftime, came out very nicely, and I'm still very confident that Stanford does not cash that 2.5 over. I'm going to come out ahead even with this upset.
Yeah, well, looking at Stanford's schedule there, I'm really not sure that there were any wins. Like Colorado was probably the most certain here, but the stretch gets pretty brutal. And they've got Cal down the stretch, but Cal's looked a little feisty on offense, or excuse me, on defense, not on offense. But it's very plausible that there's not a win there, especially with 4, I believe it is. Yeah, counting 4 ranked teams, UCLA, who just fell out of the rankings, and then Cal, who's pretty stout on defense. It does not look good for Stanford. I don't have my exact number in front of me, but it's hard to imagine that Cal has a single expected win when you add up the probabilities of all those games together for the rest of the season. Speaking of other games I really don't want to talk about, but futures that are relevant to you, Iowa's inevitable. Just nobody wants to beat Iowa. They're taking advantage of the last year of divisions. They're an objectively bad team that just does not make mistakes, and that gets you a really, really long way when you're playing against other objectively bad teams who do make mistakes. 15-6. Just a beefy all-American corn-fed game there.
You know, you say beefy, and knowing you, I know that's a positive adjective. You're meaning that as a compliment. Stop saying it about these Iowa football games. Stop saying about these Big Ten West miserable moments. This wasn't beefy. Beefy implies competence. Beefy implies some good old-fashioned moving the ball 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I was punching the ball 6.6 times per game. They're averaging 20.9 points when their offensive coordinator supposedly needs to average 25. This isn't beefy. This is monetizing incompetence.
Look, man, beefy can mean a lot of things, but I agree. It's certainly not the most aesthetic football that we want to see. Between the two, Iowa had 37 passing yards, which is very funny. It's worth noting that Wisconsin outgained Iowa by almost 100 yards and didn't even come close to doing anything resembling trying to win that game. So just absolute absurdity over there. And I'm sick of trying to advocate for Iowa not being good anymore. I'm just enjoying the ride and saying they're funny, and when there aren't divisions anymore, it's not going to last. So a lot of fun there.
I think they have officially cost me my Wisconsin Big Ten West ticket. That was at a little bit of juice, minus 130. I felt real good about it. Beat Iowa. Score one touchdown. Score one touchdown, Wisconsin, and that's out the window. I have to just eat that one and move on. Frustrating. Much of last week was frustrating, Parker. We went 2-4. And bad beats exist. Regression to the mean exists. I can very easily argue we should have gone 4-2. You lost a weeknight game on a literal Hail Mary, and that's just a gut punch. I lost an Appalachian State cover when they fumbled a breakaway play. It wasn't going to be a touchdown because he got hit, but it was going to set them up to cover the game with just a few minutes left. Both of those felt real good in our pocket until they didn't.
Yeah, hard to really evaluate that. And looking at my weeknight bets this year, my two losses, I think just 2 now with this West Virginia game, maybe 3, but involved a Hail Mary and then involved Dave Doeren not scoring. So I can look at those 2 games and say, okay, betting on Dave Doeren on the road on a weeknight, bad process. Don't like it. Not going to do it again. West Virginia had every spot here. Kind of not great personal foul on Garrett Green that celebrating that I one, just don't categorically want called, but two, if we're categorically calling those, I don't even know what that was. I've seen a lot worse not get flagged. I've seen a lot worse pregame in Boulder not get flagged, and in fact, get celebrated on ESPN. So kind of annoying for that to happen, but those are the breaks. I can take solace in the fact that this season is kind of the first one in my career where I do feel good about, hey, I've got about 6 games I can circle and be like, dang, those all went against me for the hook or for a late play like a Hail Mary or a fumble. And it used to be those were my wins, and now those are my losses dragging me down. So I feel very good about turning a corner there. And you know what? Some of that variance is just going to happen. 2-4, not terrible, still floating on the season overall. So feel pretty good about that. You hit a nail on the head with we got North Carolina there again. Is just kind of defying all odds and defying all expectations, playing okay enough defense that their offense is looking pretty good.
They're looking real good, and they won 41-31. I don't feel that game was even a 10-point game. I will go ahead and admit publicly I picked up a Drake May Heisman future over the weekend, just thinking Michael Penix is now too juiced. We know college football, it doesn't go one direction, and people who I think could mount a campaign on the back end, if North Carolina keeps winning, it's all because of Drake May. Tez Walker is going to create a storyline. We saw him shine against Miami. Miami's defense, while I laughed at it last weekend, and that's why I handicapped North Carolina, Miami's got a decent defense. For Tez Walker to shine like that, I think there's some Drake May value. I also saw North Carolina as a national champion at 75-1. That would simply be a Drake May type bet. Betting Drake May to win the ACC and create value for you there. I'm not really going to advocate that one, but I did want to point out that Drake May 18-1. Michael Penix is going to come back in some respect. This is media in 2023. He's got half a season left. He's got Utah left. At some point, he's going to throw 2 interceptions, and there's going to be some skepticism. And the people like Drake May or J.J. McCarthy or Dylan Gabriel will have value to come on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. Some strategery there that can be taken advantage of. I'm looking at North Carolina's schedule. I mean, shoot, you gotta beat Duke, Clemson, and Florida State. But
in the Heisman conversation, you need those moments.
Yep, he's got it cut out for him. Absolutely, especially if Washington were to have a stupid Pac-12 loss and put them behind the 8 ball. But it's worth doing some calculation on there because sometimes those odds are just absolutely absurd. Will note, I believe that my Texas A&M to win the West plus 160 flyer was dead after the Alabama game. But if it was not dead after the Alabama game, whatever flicker of hope there might have been is certainly extinguished. I don't know if there's anyone, literally anyone in the nation, maybe in the history of college football, that has done less with more than Texas A&M. And that's even accounting for the fact that their starting quarterback was hurt. I think Max Johnson is pretty good enough for them to have won Miami and Alabama and Tennessee games, and they are just determined to not do it. It is truly astounding.
I realized what I think may be my greatest indictment of Texas A&M right now. Saturday, I'm sitting in the Notre Dame press box, and I'm sitting next to John Bryce of footballscoop.com. John is a born and bred Tennessee man. Texas A&M Tennessee is on in the press box. Even John doesn't care because that's how little anybody's thinking about A&M. Like, he had an eye on the score, but that's when I realized that this is a press box of 100 college football nuts, and none of us really have any interest in A&M Tennessee right now. And that, in my opinion, shows you just how far A&M has fallen. They're hardly on the peripheral radar, if you will.
Yeah, it's just rough, and they've had those moments, and they have every opportunity, and they're just determined to go back to the Texas Bowl or something this year. Maybe they like it. Who knows? Looking in really quickly, we both made some playoff picks and talked about those. To varying degrees, we're doing okay. Again, these were not. Hey, what's our best odds of being the best 4? But these were, hey, here's the best value plays we think. So I had
it was
Texas.
A beer bet. It was
beer bet. Yep. I had Texas, Alabama, Penn State, all 3 very much in play. Still absolutely there. Although Texas and Alabama a little bit more tenuous. Clemson, I'm going to say I feel pretty bad about Clemson and their possibilities being 4-2 and not having one just three. I guess if they make it to the ACC championship, they'll have three ranked teams left on the schedule. They're going to have to win decisively and have some nonsense to happen. I'm going to go ahead and say Clemson's not going to make the college football playoff here. So RIP to the dream, another 10-2 and beat the heck out of somebody in a mid-tier bowl.
Wow, 10-2. You're already picking Clemson over Notre Dame. I will file that one away. Remember that in a few weeks. I'm with you on Clemson out of my playoff field. I also probably have to bite the bullet on LSU. I know some people are still trying to craft a path for LSU to make the playoff. Sure, they beat A&M, Alabama, and Georgia, but I think there are too many good Pac-12 teams and too many good Big Ten teams. And even North Carolina, Florida State in the ACC, Duke in the ACC, you need too much chaos elsewhere to argue for any two-loss conference champion this year. So I'm going to rule out LSU. That said, my playoff field included the two front runners, Michigan looking better and better, and they have a flexible pathway, as does Penn State, and Georgia. Brock Bowers is going to be out for a while, but I can make a pretty solid argument that's good for Georgia in the long run, assuming he comes back in full health. First weekend of December, then them being forced to learn about their offense for a little bit could be a good thing. So I feel pretty good about two of my four. I'll take that. And you've got those three. You could probably argue that odds-wise, at least one of the three will get in, if not two of the three.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're still alive, and we'll learn a lot about that Penn State one this weekend. Kind of transitioning over there, big game. We'll talk about two of them. Penn State at Ohio State. That's -4 and only a total of 46.5. We're looking at some defenses here, and two teams that are really, really good on the defensive side, but maybe uncertain and untested on the offensive side of things, more so for Penn State. Ohio State maybe struggling, maybe a little lackluster there, but really interested in this one. Again, I think there's a lot of people that believe that Penn State has, done as little as possible to win and is still won and potentially could roll out some more interesting offense. I did note about Penn State. The two of their top three targets are tight ends. And I don't think long run that's necessarily what they want. They want to be able to spread it out a little bit, but we're going to see who Drew Aller is this weekend for Penn State, for Penn State against Ohio State. Douglas, you got thoughts on this one?
Well, I want to note that total fell a point today. I threw that on our running outline about 10 a.m. Central today. It was 47.5. Right before the show, I noted it was down to 46.5. I'm torn if I'm thinking that's maybe some Ohio State injury news, or if it's just faith in the Penn State defense. Both of those obviously lean toward Penn State, and that line has fallen from 5.5 to 4 since Sunday. I am inclined to lean Penn State in this as long as I'm at 4 or better, in part because Notre Dame's defense held Ohio State in check. Notre Dame's defense didn't have to do anything extraordinary, just played really well. And I am convinced Penn State's defense is better than Notre Dame's. So that gets me pretty quickly to a Penn State +4 or better thought.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Not sure that Penn State can actually do it and get over the hump here, especially on the road, but should be a close game. And I'm really interested to see what Penn State can do at the receiver position if a second option kind of emerge and try to test this Ohio State defense, or is it going to come down on two kind of unproven and uncertain quarterbacks who can step up most? Sometimes the handicap is as simple as that. Which quarterback you think is going to play better? And I think there's arguments in both directions for that one. Another one that is no less of a rivalry than Penn State and Ohio State, but perhaps not going to be as close of a game here. Duke and Florida State. Currently, Seminoles are favored by 49 is the total. Of course, you can see on the screen right now, looking at the bet stamp screen here, a lot of options. I think I'm seeing a 13.5 for Florida State, and then maybe even an under 50 at Sugar House. Good old Sugar House, always having lines that intrigue me every week. Douglas, what you got on Duke, Florida State here?
Well, I made sure to check with you before the show. You're looking at numbers like SP Plus or some Parker Fleming numbers. If those numbers don't account for injuries, we always want to remind people of that. All of these numbers, whether they're yours or Bill Connolly's or anybody's in this respect, they don't account for injuries. So when you see they have Duke as a touchdown underdog, 7.5 point underdog, You have to remember that would be with Riley Leonard playing. Is he worth a touchdown to the spread? Yeah, probably is. But keep that in mind because I'm not convinced he's out this weekend. He wasn't ever really going to play this past weekend against North Carolina State. He came out in the field, walked around, but he was never. It's 3 weeks, and he's a young man who's got some of the best medicine in the world working on him. I could see a version of a maybe less mobile Riley Leonard playing. And at that point, this line's going to fall off the 2 touchdowns. So I just want to remind people that power ratings don't include injuries. And so you can use them to have an idea of the value of the player.
A sneaky, tricky back-to-back here. They very, very, very much need him to keep their hopes of an ACC championship alive, frankly. But at Florida State and then at Louisville, get a break for Wake Forest, and then at North Carolina. So tough little stretch here for Duke, and we'll see if they try to ease him back in and see if he can get any action against Florida State, or if they punt and say, we just can't risk. We'd rather have a competitive chance against Louisville and North Carolina and seeing there. I certainly don't have any ear to the ground, nose to the wind about whether he's going to play, but I can understand that there is a strategic decision more so than a physical limitation necessarily this weekend.
The way you phrase that, when we see teams do that, the one that always comes to mind for me is Virginia, Notre Dame in 2021. Notre Dame was non-conference opponent. Virginia was still in the running to win the ACC, and Brennan Armstrong had a beat-up rib injury. And so he ended up sitting out that game because it was a non-con game. Virginia was out of any bigger conversations. Duke, I can argue, whether it's realistic or not, is very much in the playoff conversation right now. So they don't want to say, if that is something that they're considering, if that is something that Mike Elko, a competitive man, is thinking, hey, I think we can sneak our way into the playoff, then they've got to risk the ankle this weekend if it's even questionable. I don't think they're at a position yet where they can think only about the ACC.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a nice position to be in for Mike Elko in year 2 over there at Duke. Douglas, any other games you want to hit quickly before we go to our
Well, we had the chameleon jump in the chat. We should tell folks, if you're here right now, first of all, the like, the rate, the review, the subscribe, all those things. If you're in the chat, I think the items are like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening to us later, rate, review, subscribe, help us out. Remind the Hammer that we do okay. Help out the Hate the Books HQ channel. We had the chameleon jump in the chat and ask if you think Utah will get to +7.5. It's Utah at USC on Saturday night. Over here, I'm seeing 7s, a few 6.5s. I don't know that we get another hook on that just because while no team is as good or as bad as their most recent game, USC's most recent game was real bad, and I don't know how much public money is going to show up on that. It could keep this to a touchdown tops.
Yeah, and I don't want to bet on Utah, especially in kind of the spot here. I don't like that at all. No, this is I don't think it's going to get there, and I don't want to bet on Utah's offense to do anything. Yeah, gross.
But now, Parker, let's get to our bets. Let's get to where we are going to advocate for money this weekend, where we like things best. And true to Parker Fleming form, you don't care about that Houston Hail Mary. You're going back to the weekday well.
I am. I need to look at where we're going to start here. I don't have mine in order. Excuse me.
Wednesday night.
We're going to start with a Wednesday night play. I'm going to talk about New Mexico State at UTEP. UTEP last week, kind of a nice unexpected performance, but that doesn't really change aggregate performances overall. I've got New Mexico State as a 3-point favorite at UTEP on the road. This season does not appear that going to El Paso is much of a feat for a lot of folks and or much of a hurdle. And additionally, New Mexico State's not traveling very far there. New Mexico State's offense, 45th in EPA per play, 45th in EPA per pass. They're 17th in success rate. They move the ball consistently and often. Their one downside this season has been that defensive success rate. They're really allowing teams to move the ball extremely frequently. They're 110th in in success rate allowed on defense, 116th in success rate allowed in the passing game. The good news for them is that UTEP does not move the ball well at all, 113th in passing success rate on offense. I don't see an avenue here for UTEP to move the ball consistently, and I don't see New Mexico State making some of the catastrophic errors that have benefited UTEP in this season so far. The other thing that stands out specifically, I think that'll determine the game, New Mexico State's been great on early downs. They've actually struggled in kind of those power situations, those third and fourth down situations. They are fifth in early downs EPA. UTEP is 93rd in early downs EPA allowed. So I like New Mexico State here. Going to ride with my boy Pavi again and take them on the road at UTEP as a favorite.
I hate this because I need UTEP to make up some ground in the Conference USA standings. One game behind Louisiana Tech, but since they lost the head-to-head, it's really 2 games. I hate this. I also can't disagree because I, more than most, know how bad UTEP is. I do want to give you a little hat tip there. Doff the cap. Nobody is better at working in a subtle geography piece into a handicap than Parker Fleming. Cincinnati hasn't played at altitude in forever when they go to BYU. Or New Mexico State's not really traveling far because El Paso is basically in New Mexico. I see you slide that right in there as you go through it. And it's true. It's what's nice about these two being conference foes. They are regional opponents as well. Conference USA covers most of the southern United States, but these two are neighbors.
Lives up to its name. Conference USA truly is across the United States. And I do believe this is the 100th battle of I-10. I want to say that's right.
I will take your word for it. I did not look that series history up this week.
So that's my play here. I think you can get that at minus 110 at DraftKings and Caesars. That's a Wednesday night game. Douglas, not very different caliber of a game. You got a little action for us.
I do have a little action for us. Northern Illinois upset Ohio last week. I backed Ohio, and so you'd think I would have learned from that and look at Northern Illinois and think, hey, they're pretty good. No, I firmly believe, as I mentioned it earlier, that no team is as good or as bad as their most recent performance. Northern Illinois is not as good as they showed on Saturday. Their number against Eastern Michigan this weekend opened at 8 and spiked up to 12.5. Now, here's where I'm going to take a quick detour. There's going to be weather in Northern Illinois this weekend, in DeKalb. There's a website that I think launched this year. It's a group of meteorologists who actually realized they all like gambling on college football. So they combined their expertise with their interest. And if there's a Venn diagram we should pay attention to, it's weather experts talking about college football, better-weather.com. That's better with an O. And the one game they have highlighted this weekend right now to this point is this Eastern Michigan at Northern Illinois. Now, it's only Tuesday, so I'm not going to sit here and advocate for the under. I'm going to wait a day or two to see if anything changes. But if we're going to consider an under here, and this spread has jumped 4.5 points to plus 12.5, I'm going to lean the underdog. Furthermore, Chris Creighton, always just bet the underdog in any Chris Creighton game. I am on Eastern Michigan plus 12.5 to neg 110, I believe, at BetMGM. It's a combination of fading Northern Illinois off a good game, trusting Chris Creighton always as an underdog, and looking at this game and thinking that total's going to fall. When the total falls and I have a 2-possession underdog, that creates some value.
Yep, love it. Love the strategy there, and I like the trend. Chris Creighton as a dog is hard to bet against here, and things get messy. That's only going to favor the underdog. I'm going to go a little more chalky for my second play here. I'm going to take an SEC matchup. It's still a little off here, but we're gonna go talk to Missouri and South Carolina this weekend. South Carolina travels from Columbia to Columbia. Am I correct on that? Columbus, maybe. And so an interesting matchup here. South Carolina kind of heartbroken against Florida last week, was up with 5 minutes left and just kind of let Graham Mertz take over and really kind of dominate them. That's part of my handicap here. Luther Burden and Theo Weiss combined for 58.7% of targets. And South Carolina's coverage has looked pretty bad at times. 55.7 against Mississippi State, 50.5 PFF grade against Florida last week. And I don't know that either of those teams, even Tennessee that they had in between those two games, have the caliber of dude and the caliber of attention that is required to defend both Luther Burden and Theo Weiss. Brady Cook has been fine and consistent, and that is all we can ask out of Brady Cook. Dang it. I feel like South Carolina really struggles to move the ball consistently on offense. They're only 28th in EPA per play, and they're 91st in defensive EPA per play allowed. That beamer ball is a little bit harder to do when you're not good at the down and out business of moving football, and South Carolina really has struggled with that. So I'm going to go Missouri and take the athleticism on the outside to exploit the South Carolina defense, to make Spencer Rattler have to feel like he has to make a lot of hero throws, which is only going to make him a little bit more erratic. And so I'll take Missouri as a 6.5 point favorite, -110 at FanDuel, I believe you can get it.
You're being too humble, so I'm going to go ahead and trumpet you on your behalf. Missouri is 6-1. One Parker Fleming holds a Missouri win total future of over 6 wins at only -115 juice. You are not only betting on Missouri to win this game by a touchdown, you are betting on Missouri to cash your win ticket halfway through October. You love to see those things line up.
Yeah, would be nice. Got a clear battle for number 2 in the East there, but yeah, I like to see the narratives come together. I like to see some confidence in the preseason rewarded, and we're certainly sitting pretty with that ticket right now. Will be interesting to see how they. I feel like this in the Kentucky game is kind of, are they real? Is this just the fluke or anything? And we're going to get a lot of questions here. If they can take care of South Carolina, we're feeling pretty good about Missouri being a real team. Your second play this week, also back in the Power 5. What you got?
It's not necessarily a real team, but it is a team looking for bowl eligibility. If you remember last week toward the end of the show, somebody asked us, Rutgers, I think it was a 5.5 point edge against Indiana and against Michigan State. And I said the piece of Michigan State to exploit is their pass defense. Rutgers doesn't have a great passing attack. I'm staying off Rutgers. That lined up perfectly. And I'm going to stick with that train of thought that Rutgers doesn't have a great passing attack and take Rutgers at Indiana. Indiana's strength is their defensive front, and I'm using the word strength charitably. Rutgers, we know Rutgers is physical and competent. They're going to be able to keep that Indiana defensive line in check, get enough positive yardage to put up enough points to win this game by 4.5. IU's offense is top 30 in rush rate over expected, but bottom 5 in rushing success rate. That's a really bad combination to put together. If you're going to run the ball that often, you'd like to, succeed on occasion. And now they're going against this physical, competent Rutgers team. Rutgers has a chance here to get their 6th win before the grueling end of their season Big Ten stretch shows up. They're going to know that. These players are not stupid. They know what they are. They know this is their chance to make a bowl game. They're going to show up motivated in Bloomington, which is turning sour on Tom Allen, and out physical Indiana pretty quickly. I've got that at -4.5, available at -113 at Sugar House and Bet Rivers last I checked. And here's where I'm going to sit here and always advocate for. We've got a -112 at Betway. Thank you, producer. I'm blanking on our producer this week.
Jason's here today.
Thank you, producer Jason. We're in a little bit of a transition there. Thank you, Parker. Thank you, producer Jason. This is where we always advocate to shop. The easiest way to improve as a sports bettor is to use multiple sports books and always get the best odds. We recommend using an odds comparison tool like BetStamp. It compares the odds across every sports book for these games. You just saw Jason find that -112 for me. Saves you time and money by checking BetStamp before you bet. Download the app today. Check out the offers in the link in the comments, the show description, betstamp.app/hitthebooks. Help us out. It doesn't cost you anything. Makes your life easier. I will gladly take a -4.5 compared to a -5 or a -5.5 every day of the week and 3 times on Tuesday.
I love it. Yep. Shopping certainly matters here. And that's half the game, honestly, is just making sure you get the best line that's out there. I'm going to take for my third pick back out to the Mountain West. Let's talk a little UNLV and Colorado State. Colorado State last week, big win over Boise, huge implications for Colorado State over 4.5, which is always fun to have that win. But if we're talking about team strength here, I think we're in a spot where Colorado State is going to be outmatched. Boise, kind of a fluky win for Colorado State, but still a win nonetheless. But before that, lost to Utah State. Has an FCS win, has a Middle Tennessee State win. So rumors of Colorado State kind of getting things going, I think, might be a little bit overstated. On the other hand, UNLV has scored 40 points in their last 5 games since getting just trounced by Michigan. And who among us has not gotten trounced by Michigan before going off to score 40 points here? What I really think is interesting about this is that UNLV's issue kind of has been run defense. They've allowed 221.5 yards per game in the rush. They're 66th in EPA per rush allowed, 63rd in rushing success rate allowed. Guess what Colorado State is uninterested in doing? Rushing. So not only do they get a little benefit UNLV on the weaker side of things on that defense by not facing a strong rushing attack, excuse me, they'll actually be able to devote more resources from the rushing attack to the passing attack. And that should really, really help stymie this Colorado State offense, 91st in EPA per play for the Rams there. On the other side of the ball, UNLV's offense is really clicking, like I mentioned, for 4 straight games of over 40. We're looking for a fifth here. They're 52.0% on 3rd and 4th downs. That's 11th in the nation compared to Colorado State's defense, which is 96th in the nation. So a lot of opportunities for UNLV to clean up, even if they can't get there on 1st and 2nd downs. I like them here by almost double digits according to my number. So that's minus 110 at BetGM and FanDuel. You can get UNLV minus 7.5. I'm going to go ahead and lock that one up for this week. I'm being told, Douglas, that's on the Mountain West Network. And I got to say, I'm going to have to Google how to get on the Mountain West Network.
I want to make that game. I have 2 notes on this, and that's one of them. First of all, I want to point out UNLV is 6-0 against the spread this year, and they're not doing it by a little. UNLV has beaten the spread by more than 12 points per game this season. Bookmakers are struggling to catch up to this team. At some point, that will happen, but it hasn't shown that way yet. And then my second point is, Parker, you are so sicko this week. You are taking a game that is not on television. The Mountain West Network, to my understanding, is on the conference website. Maybe there are some Rocky Mountain TV partners that have it. You will be going to the Mountain West Conference website to watch this game. That is a real Parker Fleming choice.
I'm almost positive that my freshman year, when TC was in the Mountain West, you could get Mountain West Network not on cable locally. No cable. Probably you had to pay a ton to get it. Nobody could get it, but you got it in the dorms. And so people would come to the dorms to watch it because you got the Mountain West Network there because you couldn't figure out how to watch the games. I remember, a couple of games like that. So, all right, you've got one more play here as we're kind of cruising along, doing great on time. What do you? What's your third play?
My game is on the very traditional television channel of the NFL Network. I am taking Appalachian State at Old Dominion on the NFL Network Saturday night. And what is the old Einstein definition of insanity? To do the same thing and expect a different result? Call me insane. Appalachian State is 3-3. It should be 5-1. It could be 6-0. Those 3 losses were a blocked field goal at Wyoming, overtime at North Carolina, and a fumble last week on a 69-yard completion in the final 5 minutes to get into cover range and fumble before you're taken down. And that leads to Coastal Carolina going the other way for the game-winning field goal. Those 3, it's frustrating, and you can say it's a team not knowing how to win. I'm going to say it's bad luck, and it's time for it to regress. Old Dominion is bottom third. It succeeds on offense, gets scoring opportunities on offense on about a third of its possessions. That's bottom 20 in the country. Appalachian State's defense allows scoring opportunities about a third of the time. That's top third of the country. So putting those 2 together, I'm not expecting much from Old Dominion on Saturday night. So I'm getting 6 points. This game is at 6, I believe, if I'm looking at this correctly. Yes, I'm getting this at 6 points with a team that is struggling to close games, but I'm banking on regression, and their defense should be the differentiating factor against Old Dominion. Maybe I'm a masochist, but I will take the pain. I'm a glutton for punishment, whatever. I'm backing Appalachian State one more time.
I like it. Going back to the well there, this is a good spot for them. And a little bit of positive regression in terms of luck after a little rough one last weekend that they should have been okay with. Douglas, that concludes all of our picks. I think we've got all 3 of them. Thanks to everybody who listened. Let's recap those real quick, and then we will do our housekeeping and get out of here. Douglas, I'm going to go with New Mexico State -3, Missouri -6.5, and UNLV -7.5. Those are my plays for this week. What about you?
You're taking those 3 favorites. I am also taking 2 favorites. Rutgers 4.5, Appalachian State by 6, and then I've got an underdog of Eastern Michigan plus 12.5. That's a bit of a weather play. I will say we had Gabe Hernandez hop in the comments and ask how we feel about Penn State. Gabe, I assume you showed up late. If you go back to about the middle of the show, we previewed the week. Parker and I both lean Penn State. Neither of us is playing it. And then we had a question about North Texas. I've got no North Texas Tulane thoughts. Sorry about that, Luke. I have absolutely no ideas there. We appreciate you all hopping in the chat. Rate, review, subscribe, like, etc. Whatever verbs I'm forgetting. And I think that's about it, Parker.
I think that's about it as well. Make sure you subscribe, like the channel, check out the other great stuff on the Hammer HQ. And with that, we'll see you next time.